Buongiorno tutti. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing well today. Welcome to week 7. You're just about the halfway point, which is great. Um, Another great lesson this week. I know I say this a lot, but this is probably my favorite lesson. It's hard to pick, but if I had to, this is probably the one. Because it's the one that I think is most just directly relevant to our everyday lives. As you'll see, once you go through content, we're going to discuss consumption and materialism, which is something that um, it's just completely rampant. It's something that's a major issue in society. Consumption drives our economy. I mean, consumption is just the purchase of, goods and services. It's not eating. And so we're consumers. We're a nation of consumers. There's all kinds of data that show this. Um, a lot of our daily decisions are driven by financial considerations and considerations of what we can do with that money. And so that's why I just think this is so relevant. And there's also a major impact of our consumerism on society and the environment. It's the key sustainability issue, really, because it's really all about economic activity, and that's really what's driving most of our sustainability problems, as I think you've probably seen throughout the content so far. Plus, there's just some really practical ways to help increase life satisfaction provided in this lesson. There's just a lot of research on all these very negative impacts of consumer thought and materialistic values and sort of how you can get away from that. So it's just a really great lesson. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you appreciate its practicality as well. Um, and this, make sure you watch this video. It's a short one. One of my Another one of my favorite videos. You get to see all my favorite videos on the internet, which is I really enjoy that part. And so we start with a lesson on consumption and materialism, and a really great video from Tim Kasser that shows a lot of details about a lot of the negative sustainability impacts and quality of life impacts of um, materialistic thoughts and consumer behavior. So, just to be really clear, before you get into the material, this is not meant to criticize anybody that likes to have nice stuff or appreciates whatever having a nice outfit on or likes to have just nice things. I mean, there's nothing wrong with caring about things like that, but that when that sort of jumps over into materialism, it's when you become sort of obsessed with having all of those things, and like that's what you think about most of the time, if not all the time. That's what drives a lot of your decision making. Um, that your focus in life is largely to get those things. It's just really damaging to have that be your primary focus, if not one or one of your primary focuses. And so that's materialism. Materialism is that's like what makes you happy. That's how you get your life satisfaction. That's sort of how you define yourself. That's how you see you see yourself. How others see you. Like it's all based on that. These extrinsic things. Whereas um, as you'll see, developing what's called intrinsic values or just self-worth for just who you are, not what you have, is a much more sort of mentally healthy way to live, and you're much more likely to have higher life satisfaction. And actually, there's a lot of environmental sort of secondary environmental impacts from having those types of materialistic impulses. So just to be clear, I'm not here to criticize anybody that buys things from time to time. I mean, I'm as guilty as the next person. Um, but if that's like your focus in life, there's a lot of reasons not to do it from a sustainability and a quality of life perspective. So that's materialism, not just liking to have nice things. Okay, so we'll start with this video here. A really great video with just chock full of all kinds of information. And then we'll get into something called the treadmill of consumption, which is I guess it's a social psychological concept that hopefully you'll see this just makes a lot of sense. So the treadmill is a metaphor, and if you think of how a treadmill works, you're running and running and running, but you're not moving forward. And so the treadmill of consumption is if you're a materialistic person and you always have to have the newest and nicest thing, whatever that thing is, um, then you are constantly trying to keep up, right? You keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And whether it's the newest, whatever, the newest iPhone that's like slightly different, if it's, fashion is a really good example of this. I don't know if you all notice, but I think it's very interesting when I come back from the summer break and then the fall semester. It seems like everyone is sort of wearing the same sort of things. Fashion has just changed and that sort of ripples through, and then all of a sudden, it's influencing other people that are influencing other people and so forth. And so fashion is that changing fashion um, is really manipulated by the fashion industry. Will change, what's in, so to speak, to sell you more stuff. I mean, to keep their industry going. I mean, if everybody was cool with wearing just whatever they felt was that looked nice, based on um, their own viewpoint, then they wouldn't be making the money that they do. And so that's a really good example of if you're on that treadmill, if you care about what's cool, what's in, what's fashionable, then you always have to buy the new stuff once it comes out. And the reason it's a treadmill is because it never stops, right? Like fashion is always changed. They're always going to come out with a new version of the iPhone. Whatever cars are updated ever so slightly every year, car models go across the board, and that's largely what drives our economic activities because people want new things. It's not just because things wear out or they're not good anymore. And so there's just a whole lot that goes into that. But the point here is that, being on the treadmill, it's moving ahead materially without any additional life satisfaction. And so you keep buying stuff and buying stuff and buying stuff to sort of keep up. But then by the time you keep up, you're just back to where you were relative to everybody else in society, right? So you're aware of what's going on in society and what everybody else thinks is cool. And so you have to buy and consume to keep up with that standard, but then you're still just, keeping up. You're not actually moving ahead in terms of life satisfaction because guess what? Next year, your clothes are out of fashion again. Your iPhone is out of date again. And so it never stops. So you're on a treadmill, right? You're just consume, 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 consume. And then at the end of the day, you're still sort of where you started because everybody else moved up as well as they consume. And so that's the treadmill. But there's a lot more that goes into that. There's a short reading about it. And that's all, there's a couple other readings of some research-based evidence of why, materialism consumption not only doesn't make us happier, but actually it turns out it's making us more miserable. Um, and in the era of social media, it's accelerated because it's a lot easier to see what everybody else is doing. So you have your whole influencer culture and all that sort of stuff. And then we'll go over the concepts of perceived and planned obsolescence. Just a short video here. And the essence of this is that product designers design products to not last a long time and make them cheap. So you make them cheap, and they um, break early. They don't last that long. Um, and then guess what? They get to sell you more stuff as opposed to making a high quality product that'll last a really really long time. That's planned obsolescence. So it's planned by the designer and manufacturer. Then perceived obsolescence is when things are still perfectly good, but you want the next thing because you're sort of influenced to believe that you need the next thing. So that speaks to that whole, keeping up the Joneses, right? Like fashion is a good example of perceived obsolescence. I have a bunch of perfectly good shirts that I'm not going to wear anymore because they're not in fashion. And so that's perceived obsolescence. Um, and then finally, we end up on greenwashing, which again is one of those things that we're just exposed to absolutely all the time, literally every day. If you're paying attention, if you're on media, I mean, you're exposed to it every day. Um, and greenwashing is like whitewashing, but for sustainability. So it's basically making you think that a product is sustainable when it's really not, or when a company really highlights their like one sustainable or slightly sustainable product, but the rest of what they do is really bad for sustainability. Like automobile industry is really good about this, or bad, I guess you could say. They'll highlight their one like EV that's made of like recycled, seat materials or whatever. But meanwhile, they're making these everything else they make and everything they sell, or most of the things they sell are these like gas guzzling SUVs, right? And so so greenwashing, or they straight up say like, oh yeah, this is a sustainable, whatever vehicle or sustainable food, um, and really it's not, right? So they sort of trick you with little subtle tricks where they're not exactly lying, but they're not telling you the whole truth. And so that's greenwashing. Again, we're exposed to this absolutely all the time. I mean, everything's sustainable now, right? Everything's green. You can find green and sustainable, just about everything. And so, the question is, are they really sustainable? Um, and I think, at the end of the day, hopefully throughout this lesson, you'll see that you're made more aware of all these little influences around you, and how they sort of like manipulate can be a strong word, but they convince you to make decisions that aren't necessarily good for you or for society or for the environment. And hopefully your eyes are a little more open up to some of the tricks that they try to pull on you. And, you know, I personally, when I read this content, I start thinking about, wow, yeah, like, I have to fight some of these materialistic impulses sometimes. And it's a good reminder of why I should do that. Because it's just not good for anything. It's really not good for anything. I mean, it helps the economy, so there's that. Just economic activity, but other than that, it's overall you're just better off minimizing your consumption, minimizing consumerism and materialism as a value, and also keeping an eye out on how companies try to trick you into buying things. So a lot of this has to do with the marketing industry. There's a lot of cleaning up that needs to be done, shall we say, in the marketing industry in terms of a lot. And so hopefully you'll have a better sense of, a lot of these things that are driving, societal dissatisfaction today. So again, it's just a really practical lesson. There's so many things in here, and I hope you use the content as sort of a jumping off point into making more discoveries. I mean, there's just again, this is an overview of a lot of these concepts, and hopefully you find something that resonates with you, and you keep it and carry it with you. All right, well, I hope you enjoy the content. As always, contact me if you have any questions.